Monster Hunter World provides hunters with numerous tools and weapons to take on the beasts that roam the world. With each weapon comes a unique set of moves and mechanics that a hunter must master. With training and knowledge of these, a hunter can decimate the monstrous foes that lie in their way. I'm Darcblade, and in this video we're going to bring you a hunter's guide to the Heavy Bowgun. The Heavy Bowgun is one of the ranged options available to hunters in Monster Hunter World. Being able to take monsters on at a distance obviously comes with its advantages. At range, you can keep yourself out of harm's way of monsters' attacks. The Heavy Bowgun, like its sister weapon, the Light Bowgun, come with a plethora of different ammo types, but the Heavy Bowgun has more heavy hitting options available to it, allowing it to deal more damage. Due to the weapon's size as well, it normally comes with large magazine capacities for the various ammunition types available to it. However, the weapon is incredibly slow to use. Some of the ammunition types have very slow rates of fire, and your hunter's movement speed is severely reduced with this weapon out. Nonetheless though, you can alleviate this with gear skills, the evasion move, and even the environment. Once you've got used to how the Heavy Bowgun maneuvers, as well as the potential damage it can deal out, you'll be using one of the hardest hitting ranged weapons in the game. But anyway, let's move on to talk about the basic moves of the Heavy Bowgun. Now the Heavy Bowgun only has a few moves available to it. The first move is to draw a weapon, which is done by either pressing triangle or by pressing R2. If done with pressing triangle and your current ammo type is not at maximum, then it will automatically reload that specific ammo type. Next is aim, which is done by holding L2. You can then use the right stick to aim, whilst the left stick will control your movement as normal. Next is R2, which is to fire the weapon. Now you can either fire while aiming down sights, so holding L2 then pressing R2, or you can fire from the hip by simply pressing R2. Now remember, depending on what ammo type you are using, you have to contend with that ammo type's recoil and the actual deviation of the weapon you are using. Next is roll, which is done with X. Now moving the left stick and pressing X will control the direction you roll, and this is a move you have to get used to compensate the slow movement issues of the Heavy Bowgun. So rolling can not only help you get closer to a monster, so you can get in range with your weapon, but it can also be used to get out of harm's way. The next basic move is reload, which is either done when you're out of ammo by pressing R2 or by pressing triangle. This will reload the currently selected ammo you have. Now depending on what ammunition type you are using, the reload animation will be different. If you're using a low level ammunition type, it's normally quicker than a level 3. Next is to load or unload your special ammunition type, and this is done by pressing circle. Depending on what weapon you are using, you'll have different special ammo, but we'll talk about that more in a moment. Once the ammo is loaded, press R2 to fire the special ammunition you have loaded. The next basic move is to cycle through your ammunition types, which is done by holding L1 and then pressing triangle for up or X for down. You can also press up and down on the D-pad if you prefer. This will cycle through your ammunition types. Now the different ammunition types are indicated in the bottom right of your screen, and all you have to do is highlight whichever ammunition type you want in order for it to be loaded into the bowgun. Next is the melee attack, which is done by pressing triangle and circle together. This is a pretty slow bog standard melee attack, but it does deal blunt damage, so it can potentially KO a monster should you hit them in the head. But anyway, let's move away from the basic moves to talk about the mechanics of the Heavy Bowgun. Now first of all, we'll talk about the special ammunition types. There are two, and depending on which bowgun you craft, you'll notice that when crafting it, it will say if it's a Wyvern Heart or a Wyvern Snipes special ammunition type. Both the special ammunition types are indicated in the bottom right of your screen above your ammunition types. Now when it comes to both the special ammunition types, they will recharge by themselves over time after use. Now the Wyvern Heart is most akin to, say, a light machine gun. So the individual bullet damage is very low, but the rate of fire is incredibly high. So if you're able to consecutively hit a monster, the sustained fire will definitely cause the damage to rack up. Now interestingly enough about the Wyvern Heart is you don't have to have your special ammunition bar filled up in order to use it. You can unload and reload it via circle whenever you see fit. However, depending how full the meter is, will dictate the amount of shots you get with the weapon. Next is the Wyvern Snipe, which is more akin to a sniper shot. It's a single shot piercing round that will penetrate a monster, hitting multiple hitboxes along the way. These multiple hits deal decent damage, but on top of that, they will leave behind a small explosive for each hitbox it pierced through. These explosives will then explode, causing even more damage to the monster. Now when using the Wyvern Snipe, you will lay down in a sniper position. You will basically become immobile whilst taking that shot, so you have to make sure you're in a safe location before committing to it. But nonetheless though, the Wyvern Snipe is a great opening move, or failing that, a decent move for when the monster is incapacitated. Unfortunately, the Wyvern Snipe can only be used when the special ammunition gauge is full. Anyway, the next mechanic is critical distance. When using the Heavy Bowgun, you'll see an aim reticule, and depending on your distance and what ammo type you're using, this will change. What you want to strive for is the aim reticule that has two circles. So it'll be a large circle on the outside and a smaller one in the middle. This will indicate that you're at critical distance, and all your shots at that distance should be dealing the most amount of damage they can. If you move away further, it will turn into a single circle, which means that your hits will still deal damage, but it just won't be optimal damage. And then if you move even further away, eventually it will say out of range, and it means that your shots will be doing next to nothing. Now, depending on what type of ammunition you are using, the critical distance can change. So this is something to take into account. For example, spread ammo, which is a close range ammo type, requires you to be very close to a monster for your hunter to be within critical distance. So this is something to be aware of when getting used to the heavy bowgun. The next mechanic is the recoil. Now, depending on what ammunition type you are using, you will have to contend with different amounts of recoil. If you are generally using stronger ammunition types, you'll have to contend with strong recoil. Because the recoil will kick your player back, it will render the player immobile for the recoil animation, which can leave you in harm's way. If the heavy recoil is something you struggle with, maybe consider switching to the lower rank ammunition types, which generally have lower recoil, or implementing some recoil customizations to your bowgun. The next mechanic is deviation. Now, when creating your heavy bowgun, you'll notice that there is a category called deviation, and it will say low, medium, high. Now, deviation basically affects the direction and severity of bullets deviating from their intended path. You can tell this by your reticule severely jumping when you actually fire your weapon. So weapons with high deviation, you'll notice the reticule jumping quite high as you fire the weapon. Now, the closer you are to the target, the less this is an issue, but the further you are away, the more effect this will have on your accuracy. Now, it should be noted as well that the ammunition types you use have no effect on the deviation properties of a weapon. But again, like recoil, deviation can be adjusted with bowgun customizations. Anyway, the next mechanic is the multiple reload mechanic. Now, while you can reload your weapon with triangle, should you hold down triangle, it will reload every ammunition type you have in your bags in order. Now, whilst this is a very long animation, as you'll be reloading every single ammunition type you have, it's nonetheless a decent way to reload the weapon and get you back into the action. However, you should only really commit to this in between fights or when there is a clear opening. The next mechanic is the ammunition types. Now, depending on what heavy bowgun you are using, you will have access to various ammunition types. These are indicated in the bottom right of your screen, and whichever one is highlighted will be automatically used when the weapon's drawn. The ammunition counter as well will be indicated either under your aim reticule or again in the bottom right. Now, depending on what heavy bowgun you have crafted, not all ammunition types will be available to you. So when you're crafting your heavy bowgun, consider what ammo types are available to that specific bowgun you want to craft. You can preview these at the blacksmith. And finally, the last mechanic for the heavy bowgun is the bowgun customizations. Now, both the light and heavy bowguns can be customized in various ways, and depending on the rarity of your weapon, you can have up to 3 customizations. These are done by talking to the smithy in Astera. Anyway, there are 6 available to the heavy bowgun. First is recoil suppressor, which obviously reduces the recoil of your various ammunition types. There's reload assist, which will speed up the reload times of the weapon. There's deviation suppressor, which reduces the deviation of the weapon, although it should be noted that if your weapon has no deviation whatsoever, you can actually use this mod. There's close range up, which increases the attack power of your weapon when firing at very close range. And then there's ranged attack up, which increases your attack power when firing from long range. And then finally, unique to the heavy bowgun is the shield, which allows the heavy bowgun to be equipped with a shield at its front, which means that when you're aiming at a monster and it attacks directly in front of you, you can guard against that attack. Now, as I said, depending on the rarity of your weapon, you can have up to 3 customizations on your bowgun, and these effects will stack. So for example, take the shield. Should you only have 1 shield customization, it'll be akin to, say, having a sword and shield. But should you have 3 shield customizations on your heavy bowgun, it will be akin to maybe a lance or gun lance shield. Unfortunately though, having multiple of the same type of customizations on a weapon will result in diminishing returns. But nonetheless, it can still be worth it, especially when it comes to certain ones. If you're going for certain builds, for example, if you're going for a close range build, you want to try to stack all the close range up customizations on your heavy bowgun for maximum damage. Now, you can see the effect of all of these customizations on the various ammunition types it will have for your specific bowgun by talking to the blacksmith, pressing L3, and checking them out that way. But anyway, next, this is normally where I would move on to talk about the useful combos for the weapon, but unfortunately the bowgun doesn't really have any useful combos whatsoever. Like with its sister weapon, the light bowgun, its complexity and depth come in the different ammunition types available to it. Now, depending on what weapon you're using, you'll have access to different ammunition types, and these will range from level 1 to 3, with level 1 being the weakest but having the least recoil, and level 3 being the highest but having the most recoil normally. The ammunition types available to the heavy bowgun include normal ammo, which is pretty bog standard ranged attacks, pierce ammo, which is decent at long range and allows the shot to pierce through a monster, hitting multiple hitboxes along the way. So trying to hit as many body parts when using this ammo is optimal. Next is spread ammo, which is your close range ammo, as it has a wide cone and deals most damage whilst at pretty much point blank range. Next is sticky ammo, which is ammunition type that fires a sticky bomb that attaches itself to a monster then explodes shortly after, and this deals explosive damage, so if used against the head it can potentially KO a monster. Next are cluster bombs, which is some of the highest damage dealing ammunition types available to the heavy bowgun. This causes your hunter to get down on one knee and, in a mortar style, fire a shell up into the air, which will then rain down on a monster's location, splitting into multiple fragments that then explode. Now, whilst this is one of the highest damage dealing ammo types available to the heavy bowgun, unfortunately the explosions from the cluster bombs will knock any ally that is within range of the explosions flying. So you have to be considerate when using this ammunition type. It should be noted that cluster bombs will actually knock the user back should they be caught in the explosion. Next is slicing ammo, which will fire a projectile to a monster, then stick to them, and shortly after it will cause moderate slicing damage to the monster, so this is a nice way to potentially sever monster parts like the tail. Next is Wyvern ammo, which is a hard-hitting ammunition type available to the heavy bowgun. Unfortunately though, it does have a charge-up time, so when committing to the move you will be locked in place as the animation plays out, after which you will release a heavy hitting move against the monster. Again though, like cluster bombs, this will send allies flying, so be considerate when using it. Out of all the moves available to the heavy bowgun, this is probably best used against sleeping monsters, especially if there are no harder hitting weapons available to a hunting party. Next are the elemental ammunition types, which includes flaming ammo that deals fire damage to a monster, there's water ammo that deals water damage to a monster, thunder ammo that deals thunder damage to a monster, and freeze ammo that deals ice damage to a monster. There is also dragon ammunition, which is a slow moving rocket projectile that can pierce multiple body parts along the way, dealing multiple hits. But on top of that, because it is dragon, it comes with Elder Seal, which is the heavy bowgun's way of dealing the Elder Seal effect to a monster. It should also be noted it deals dragon damage as well. There are then ailment ammunition types that can cause different status ailments to a monster. Now these are not done in one shot, as each shot just basically builds up the status ailment before applying it. Anyway, there's poison ammo that can potentially poison a monster, paralysis that can potentially paralyze a monster, leaving them vulnerable for a few moments. There's exhaust ammo that can wear down a monster's stamina, leaving them exhausted. And then there's sleep ammo, which can potentially put a monster to sleep. And then finally you have support orientated ammunition types. These include recover ammo that can heal your teammates when you shoot them. There's demon ammo that applies an attack boost to your allies. There's armor ammo that applies a defense boost to your allies. And then there's tranquilizer ammo. That is basically a ranged tranq bomb. But anyway, let's move away from the ammunition types to talk about the environmental and aerial moves available to the heavy bowgun. Now, as this weapon is quite slow and cumbersome, it's not the most nimble in the air. Nonetheless though, it does have a few attacks available to it. Should you jump off a ledge or running up a runnable wall, you can either press R2 or triangle to perform a mid-air draw attack, after which, after you land, this will automatically allow you to reload the weapon. This is quite a quick reload, and it can help alleviate some of the longer reload animations. Also, while sliding down a slope, you can either press R2 to start firing the weapon, as long as it doesn't have severe recoil, or you can press X to jump and then go into triangle or R2 to do your mid-air jumping attack, which is then followed up by the jumping reload. Also, when it comes to the environment, should you fire a weapon after just jumping off a ledge that has high recoil, it will push you backwards, back onto the ledge that you've just jumped off of. This can help potentially manage high recoil, although the practicality of this move is questionable. But anyway, let's move away from the environmental and aerial moves to talk about the additional tips for the heavy bowgun. As I mentioned, critical distance is very important, so you have to get used to getting into optimal range with this weapon, so you can maximize your damage. As I mentioned in the basic moves, get used to using the roll. As the heavy bowgun is very slow, the roll can help when it comes to movement, not only to get yourself closer or into position where you can get that critical distance, but also potentially dodge a monster's attack. When it comes to the special ammunition types, the Wyvern Heart, the shots with this weapon become more powerful if they are aimed at the same body part, so this is something to strive for. Also with the Wyvern Snipe, the explosions from this shot become more powerful the more hits the initial projectile has made. So aiming down the length of a monster is going to be your goal with the Wyvern Snipe. It should also be noted that when it comes to reloading the weapon, certain ammunition types, normally the lower level ones, can be reloaded on the move. Should you be using the Reload Assist customization mod, then this potentially allows you to reload some of the normally longer reload animation ammo types on the move as well. Lastly, when it comes to the heavy bowgun, when you're in the middle of a heated fight, sometimes it can be detrimental to stop and reload the weapon, especially if the monster is highly mobile and has you in their sights. So instead of stopping to reload or having to run away and reload, you can quickly just switch to a different ammunition type. As there is no animation needed to change the ammo type you are using, you just have to select it by pressing up and down on the D-pad or L2 and triangle and X. You can change to an ammo type that is still full to continue assaulting a monster. Obviously, when using this tactic, understanding the order of your ammunition types can come in very useful for this tactic, but nonetheless it allows you to continue attacking without having to stop for a break. It's also worth considering that when using the heavy bowgun, or in fact any bowgun, that you customize your radio menu to allow you to quickly select the ammo types you wish to use, or even set it up so you can craft ammunition whilst in the field, so you don't have to constantly keep going back to camp. But anyway, let's move away from the additional tips to talk about the pros and cons of the heavy bowgun. Now the biggest pro for the heavy bowgun is its access to heavy firepower. This allows it to deal decent damage, and while some of the ammunition types that allow it to deal decent damage can cause problems for your allies, the weapon is nonetheless a hard-hitting tool. The next major pro is, unlike the sister weapon, the light bowgun, the heavy bowgun generally comes with large clip sizes. Whilst there are a few exceptions, most of the time the heavy bowgun will be able to fire a fair amount of bullets at a monster before having to reload. And then finally, the next major pro is the versatility of ammunition types. Now yes, the heavy bowgun has access to some of the highest damage dealing ammunition types for the bowguns, but it also has access to status ailment ammunition types, elemental ammunition types, and even buffs that can provide a pseudo support role for your teammates, if you were so inclined. However, on the flip side, when it comes to the cons, unfortunately the biggest con and major one for the weapon is its slow movement. With the weapon out, you move incredibly slow, and sometimes this can cause you to take unwanted damage. Now whilst I've said you can use moves like the roll mechanic to alleviate it slightly, it's nonetheless an issue that heavy bowgun users will have to face. And then finally, the last major con is the weapon's sheath and unsheath speed. It takes a long time to draw this weapon and to put away this weapon, and whilst this can be alleviated slightly with gear skills, it's nonetheless an annoyance this weapon faces. Overall, the heavy bowgun is the hard-hitting option when it comes to ranged weapons. Generally, it has larger clips and comes with far greater firepower options than, say, the light bowgun. However, thanks to its increased damage output potential, it suffers when it comes to movement speed. While some of these issues can be alleviated with other moves like the roll move and certain gear skills, it's the counterpoint to this weapon's potential damage output. That being said, utilising traps or using different ammunition types to incapacitate a monster through ailments will leave a monster vulnerable to your high damaging moves. And should you manage to set yourself up in a good position, you can bring down a monster incredibly quickly with this weapon. If you're a player who loves dealing damage, who also enjoys ranged weapons, and isn't too bothered by movement speed, then I can definitely recommend the heavy bowgun. Now remember that the damage numbers and effectiveness of the weapons can vary due to numerous factors, from gear, buffs, monster defenses to even the environment. All of these can help or hinder a weapon's performance. With that in mind, learning as much about your weapon as possible will help achieve a successful hunt. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you a hunter's guide to the heavy bowgun in Monster Hunter World. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.